Good morning. This is Kevin Brown. I'm the Interim Commissioner of Education. I want to welcome everyone to the Commissioner's Parent Advisory Council. We're going to start off today's meeting in a little unusual fashion, and I'm just going to ask for you to indulge me for a few minutes. This meeting is the first official public meeting that we've had since the department had a tragedy and a death yesterday among our team. And I think it's appropriate to honor that person here today, being our first meeting. She actually worked behind the scenes to get this meeting prepared. Her name is Teresa Perry. She was the executive secretary to the commissioner. She suddenly passed away yesterday doing work for the department. She was found at her computer um, and worked for the Commonwealth up until she passed away. And I would just like for all of us to just join in a moment of silence, honoring her and her work to the department and to the Commonwealth. Thank you. Thank you for those of you that may not have known her. Thank you for indulging us in that. She worked behind the scenes, so uh, meetings like this could take place. And just want please keep the staff and Teresa's family in your thoughts and prayers as we move forward. Again, want to welcome everyone to the Parents Advisory Council. Um, before before the global pandemic started, and since I'm the interim commissioner, the plan was for us to defer most of the advisory councils um, until the new commissioner started, which we anticipate will be in late July or early August. And obviously, the needs have changed since then because of the global pandemic, and we're dealing with COVID. And so we are bringing in all of the advisory councils. And as you may know, there are numerous advisory councils for the commissioner for every role group. Of course, parents, teachers advisory, a students advisory. And so that's why we're bringing you back. Um, and as you can see from the agenda, we have a lot of, um, obviously, it's all around what we are dealing with right now as a result of COVID-19 and what we anticipate will happen as we begin school. And so, as parents, it is essential that we hear your feedback. You will notice that after every agenda item, there's a guiding question, and the presenters will remind you of the guiding question. But if you can bring up the agenda, make sure that you're looking at the guiding question. We want you're on the Commissioners Advisory Council for us to hear from you, not just for you to sit and listen to us. While that has to be part of it to give you information, we really want to hear from you, your thoughts, your concerns, your worries, what you're hearing from your children and your communities. That will really help us as we move forward in making decisions and issuing guidance to school districts as we attempt to reopen school and get back to some sense of normalcy for the next school year. So we have a very hefty agenda. I know we have 2 hours allotted. But it's a hefty agenda, and I know this group will not be bashful about giving us your feedback, and that's exactly what we want. And then at the very end, before we adjourn, if we have time, we will also just have a general question and answer session. If you have questions about things that we did not cover or feedback or guidance, we want to obviously um, have you provide that for us. I would also, if you're new to using Microsoft Teams, when you move your mouse around, you'll notice the toolbar pops up there, and you can click on the little quote, and that shows the conversation, the chat feature. If you want to use that, if you don't want to raise your hand or comment verbally on feedback, you can type that into the chat feature. We record all of that as well. So if you type something in the chat and as a comment or a question, that will be the same as if you were to. And there's also a raise your hand feature. You can raise your hand and speak. That will count the same, and we will record all of that. In addition, you'll be given an exit slip. We started using the exit slips with our student advisory, and we found that that also is a great way to provide feedback. Sometimes you may not feel comfortable providing uh, uh, information, or you don't want to speak up, or maybe you think of something just right after you sign off and you want to put that in your exit slip. We want to hear from you. We also use that to help us gather feedback. And I want you to know we don't just have these advisory councils for show. We use this information. We have a feedback loop is what we call it. And when we meet together as a leadership team, we talk about the feedback, the issues that you're raising. We will talk about that at our leadership team meeting on Monday. We will also then inform the State Board of Education, and that kind of works as a feedback loop as we're hearing from other advisory groups as to what may be common themes, what may be issues that are an issue for parents that may be different than an issue that might be there for administrators or teachers, and then how do we reconcile those things. So I just want to make sure you know we highly value this process, and I want to thank you again for taking time out from your day to do this. So I don't want to take any more time hearing from me. We're going to get right into the agenda, and we have the first item is reentry guidance about teaching and learning. Stage one, and we have Krista Hall and Misty Higgins with us to present that information. And of course, the guiding question is, what concerns might parents have about academic readiness for their children upon reentry to school in the fall? So please keep that question in mind as you hear the presentation from Krista and Misty.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. And I definitely want to echo what Kevin was saying about, we really do want your feedback from your role and how you're seeing the concerns as we reopen in the fall, what you're seeing at home with your students, and what pushback you may have on the guidance, because we are making adjustments and we are trying to be very responsive to the needs, not only of our schools and districts, but all of our communities that are involved, all of our role groups, whether that's our parents, our businesses, our students, just in all the aspects of education. And so this specific guidance that we recently released was to support teachers in academic reentry for the fall. And so what this was, it was a 3-part series webcast that gave a step-by-step process for teachers to begin analyzing the curriculum that they were able to teach this past school year, because we recognize this past school year ended very differently. And we have to be aware that that means that we may not have gotten as far as we had planned to do so, or that changes did occur. So that information is going to impact how we reopen academically in the fall. So I'm going to have my colleague Misty Higgins share a little bit more specifics about that series, and then we'll come back and see if you have any comments or questions for us.
Thank you. And again, thank you all for having us on here today. And like Krista said, not only did this last school year end very differently, but this next school year, we're not really sure what it's going to look like either. And so what we wanted to do was to provide guidance to teachers to help them get a plan in place that will work regardless of the way that we start our school year, whether it's remotely, whether it's in person, a hybrid, whatever the case may be. We're trying to give teachers this process to develop a plan that will allow them to kind of address the unique situation we're in. And not to go in too specific on the process for you all, but just to let you know, the goal of that process, the first part was really just to help teachers kind of trim their curriculum that they taught this year to really make sure they include what's absolutely necessary for students to meet the grade level standards. So how can they trim that academic portion of their curriculum down to make sure that students this next school year will still be able to get what they need to reach the expectations of the academic standards. But what we needed them them to do, and the reason they've got to trim it down, is because they needed to make room to address what we know are going to be those potential gaps that kids will have because of the extended remote learning. And so part of that process is teachers working together at their grade level to identify where do we anticipate the academic gaps being for our kids, and then sharing that information in vertical conversations with the grade level above. So the grade level above can plan for that in this upcoming school year. So the goal is they get to start the school year with an academic curriculum in place that's kind of pared down to what is absolutely necessary to meet grade level, as well as having those identified areas of gaps from the grade level below, so that we're helping to make sure students do not fall behind because of this remote learning. And so again, that was a big picture plan, but one thing we did want to share with you all as well is, so what happens when kids do come back in? What is there in place for teachers to kind of help actually meet the needs as they see the students day to day? And so part of our stage 2 guidance, which we plan to release in July, is really helping the teachers to take the curriculum that they've created for this upcoming year, and then to use what we know are some best practices from the research around formative assessment. So how do they, minute by minute, day by day, really gather a sense of where their kids are, and then use that information in an ongoing way to help adjust instruction to keep every single kid moving where they need to move next, and then giving them the supports that they're going to need. You know, the remote learning was kind of interesting because kids across the board, some of them flourished in that remote learning and they probably went even beyond what maybe had been assigned from teachers. Whereas we know that there were some inequities that existed out there where some kids didn't even necessarily get the access that they needed. So it's going to be a unique situation for teachers. And that's why we believe that formative assessment piece is going to be critical in where are my kids, where do they need to go, how do I close the gap to help them get to that. And that's where that formative assessment piece is going to come in. So that's what we've given them the process to develop the big picture plan. We're going to give them guidance around how do we then enact that plan, implement it, and use formative assessment in July. We're going to make sure we have that out ready for them before they go into the new school year.
Yeah, and we realize that our teachers are very anxious to start working on next year. And so while there are still so many unknowns about how next year may look, and even once we get to the fall, we recognize there could be changes that occur. And teachers are realizing that they may be needing to address that hybrid situation where they have some students face-to-face and they have some that would be virtual. But this is work where they can start using their expertise around their academic standards, around their content, and around their curriculum to really start identifying that foundation of what it is they're going to need to teach, regardless of what the situation looks like in the fall, because it will be applicable.
And I would add one other thing too, is we want you all to know we completely recognize the academic side is not the only critical side to address with our students coming back in. So there is guidance and support that's coming around that social emotional side as well. But what our office is kind of tackling right now is how do we support the academic side? And again, we know all of those pieces are critically important to help our students transition back in. And that's why we're kind of taking that lens of the academic approach.
Yes, I thank you, Misty, for pointing that out. So in the chat box, I did go ahead and drop the guiding question. So what concerns might parents have about academic readiness for their children upon reentry to school in the fall? If you have any comments or questions, you can either put them in the chat box, or if you want to unmute, you can definitely do that as well.
Well, this is Rhonda with Kentucky Spin. I don't know, can you all hear me? I'm on the phone, but seeing visually with you all.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so, well, you know I'm not bashful, but first I do want to thank you all for everything in the guidance that's been provided, because the consistency in the message and having the tools not only for schools, but for families, and that we can all share with one another, we are so grateful for. And the amount of guidance that has been coming out. I mean, every day I get up and there's something else. So please know that that is greatly appreciated. And I think it has helped all of us to work through this. I do have obviously concerns when we go back, just as everybody does, and how that it is going to play out for all of our children, but especially for our children with disabilities. And I did love that the one that was released on the 8th, how the design and the strategies to approach it did bring up not only for children who have disabilities, their parents could decide that there could be a strategy in the opt-in hybrid. Because many of our children who have disabilities, even if other students go back, it may not be safe for them to, because they are in the high-risk category. But enabling them to be able to still get that quality access, and because due to the variety of disabilities, and really making sure and how we can all work together, and as much guidance that can come out that is going to help us, so that, because we know our children, there's, it couldn't be helped with this. We're all doing the best we can, that they are, everybody has missed something, but for our children with disabilities, it is going to cause even 10 times more than it might for other children. So I guess any way we could work together and help and develop and train across the board on the contingency plans that will be developed, and helping families, any way we can help with that. That's kind of how we've looked at our role with this, is to help provide the guidance to families and explain it and step through it as we all work together.
Yes. First of all, thank you for your feedback on the guidance. We certainly appreciate that that's been helpful, and we recognize that there has been a tremendous amount coming out, as there are just so many issues with this. And we definitely agree that all of our special populations and different needs of our students have to be taken into account. And part of this guidance that we have put out is to make sure to include teachers of students with special populations, so that that lens can be considered when addressing what content will need to be addressed in the fall, and really thinking about what are those strategies that they can assist with in their expertise around meeting the needs. Because like you said, when we already had students who had some special needs and we're working to try to catch up, and then we have the extended remote learning, it does impact that. And so being sure to include all of those educators in that process to help really inform what will be best to meet students' needs is essential.
And I would also add to that, when we talk about our stage 2 guidance around formative assessment, there are certain evidence-based practices that we're really going to highlight within that. And when you look at the research around those practices, we've been very selective in what we really want to focus in on. And many of those strategies, while they're good for all kids, they've been especially impactful for students who do have disabilities. And so within that guidance, we want to ensure that we offer teachers suggestions of how to really implement those strategies, both in the classroom setting and in the virtual setting. So even if we have students who are impacted in such a way that they're not able to return to schools in the fall, like in the in-person setting, these strategies can still be utilized to help make sure that they're getting what they need academically from their teachers.
Well, and that's one of the things I've noticed with every piece of guidance from the get-go that has been included, which is unheard of. All of our minority groups, and even to the latest guidance being rolled out about conversations we need to help, guiding questions, regardless if it's disability, race, all of these things, so that we're all addressing them, and that it is being put on the forefront because we know we need to do this. So it's greatly appreciated.
Rhonda, you also touched on something that I want to comment on about the hybrid model, and parents maybe having a fear of sending a child back, or maybe the child's medical condition is not advisable to be back in a public environment, even if we're back in school. We want to make sure that districts are empowered and have the authority and the permission and the support from the state to meet students and parents where they are. So right now, our current system and the statutes and regulations, everyone's either in a classroom and we're having school, or we're closed for snow or flu or a pandemic and we're doing NTI. There's really no middle. And so we're going to create a middle for this next semester. And we are trying to develop through waivers and emergency orders from the governor. You're going to be seeing something from us and the lieutenant governor, the governor here in a few days to make that happen, meaning that if a parent tells a school district, I'm not sending my child in, the school district can say that is okay. We are happy to serve that child sitting at home, and here's how we're going to do it, even though that child's class, the majority of those children's classmates will be back at the school. That's going to be okay this year if the district wants to do that. And we're going to use, because the General Assembly won't be meeting until January, we're going to have to use waivers of the state board and the governor's emergency powers to allow districts to count attendance differently, meaning that if Johnny is sitting at home and then the rest of Johnny's classmates are back in the class in a classroom, the district still gets to educate Johnny and claim Johnny in attendance as if Johnny were sitting in that classroom. Right now, that's not even thinking outside the box. That's nowhere near the box of the way that our system is arranged. But it will be for next semester, at least until the General Assembly can come back in and then hopefully memorialize some of those options in January. But we want to make sure that all students are covered. Districts have the ability to educate them, even though it is going to be in a way that we have never really ever envisioned. And so that's what we're working towards.
Thank you, because that's been another huge worry of mine is the truancy issues and everything regarding that. So I am so grateful to hear that. Thank you.
And I would just add, not to belabor this, but that also means that it's going to be a heavier lift for districts. That doesn't just mean that you give Johnny the same packet or that it's the same NTI. This NTI, the non-traditional, and having students some remote and some in class, that has to continue to get better, and it is getting better. We've kind of used a saying at the end of the close of this semester that the non-traditional instruction was better May 1st than it was March 16th, and then it was better on May 15th than it was on May 1st, because we were all getting better at it and it was becoming somewhat of a new normal, even though it has many imperfections, particularly for students with disabilities and trying to implement IEPs that we have to address and have to fix.
We also have a question in the chat box from Cindy. If we go back to school with virtual classes and kids have to go to babysitters during the day, some parents can't help their students with their schoolwork. And since they are having to do it after school hours, the teachers aren't available either. This is a real need. I think this goes along with some of what Commissioner Brown was just saying, that schools and districts are learning how to do this process better. They recognize that this is an issue. And when we think about how this happened back in March, we had schools that weren't even NTI schools that very quickly had to figure out how they were going to be providing these services for all students with very little time to prepare. And so as we have gotten better in the process and schools have had more time to really think through what they're able to provide and how to reach out to students that may not have the accessibility and use their resources in the schools to meet those needs, that process will look better in August as we re-enter than it did when we left in May, because that is an issue that has happened across the board. Well, if we don't have any more questions or comments, then Commissioner Brown, I can turn it back to you. And I believe that Hannah that's going next.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Krista and Misty, are you all able to stay for the remainder of the meeting, or do you have other engagements?
I can stay on, yes.
Okay, because we may have some other issues, or if they think of questions related to your presentation, if you can stay on, I
Most
appreciate that. Thank
Mhm.
you. Hannah Poquette is with the is a strategic data analyst with the Office of the Commissioner, and she's going to talk to us about the Superintendent Needs Sensing Survey that she is developing. And the guiding question is, what additional topics could be included in the survey to provide a greater understanding of families' educational needs in anticipation of the upcoming school year? Hannah?
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner Brown. And thank you all for your time today. And I just want to echo Commissioner Brown in thanking you for your input and all the energy you're putting behind this work. It's really crucial to hear your perspectives. And so we really look forward to hearing from you today. Let me just share my screen here. I have a few slides that I think will help along the way. All right, there we go. Yes, and I apologize, there's a little typo on the agenda. We're actually going to cover the Family Need Sensing Survey, which is one of the 4 surveys that we're going to be implementing today, or implementing in the coming weeks here and talking about today. And so today we just want to share a little bit about the survey project we're working on. We're going to be surveying education stakeholders as we come up to this next school year to understand, what needs there are across the state. And then today we're also looking for feedback on some of the topics that we're going to be covering in the family need sensing surveys to really make sure we're getting the most critical issues that we can and getting the best data we can. So to begin, I'm just going to start off with a little bit of background on the project itself. The purpose of the survey work is to systematically learn about the educational needs that are resulting from the COVID-19 crisis. And from the family survey, it's particularly digging into what are the needs of families and caregivers who are supporting their students during this really odd time. And so we're trying to keep these surveys relatively short and focused to get the most crucial information and to make sure we're not overburdening folks who are already burnt out, and also to be able to rapidly turn around some data analysis on this to help guide our work. But the main objective in these surveys is to gather this data and use it to help us make sure our work is aligned to the need that is being identified by and prioritized by education stakeholders. And also it will help us in assisting schools and districts in how they can best engage families as well. And will also help us to, as we partner with other groups, also who are supporting various needs in their communities as well. So the whole survey project has 4 different audiences. There are surveys being sent to superintendents, principals, teachers, and then families as well. And the family survey is what we'll be talking about today. So for the guiding question, in particular, we're looking to learn about families' educational needs in anticipation of this upcoming school year. And so what I'm going to do today is walk through sort of higher level summaries of the chunks of the survey to show what topics we've included so far. And we'd really like feedback to see if there are other topics that we should consider that we've left off, or that if there's adjustments we can make to make sure we're really getting data on the crucial needs that families are facing in supporting their students. So I'll be threading this question through the next couple of slides as we go over the different sections. So the first section on the survey is asking about information technology. Access to technology was obviously a big issue this past spring, and so we really want to learn about what this looks like across the state and how we might be able to support this. So we're asking questions in 2 main categories. One will be on equipment availability, and specifically we'll ask about whether equipment is available in terms of laptops or desktop computers, tablets, smartphones, or no access at all. We'll also be asking about access to the internet, both in terms of whether devices can connect, or as well as the type of internet that is accessible to students, whether it's in-home subscriptions that have been purchased or all the way to no access at all. So in terms of the information technology piece, I'll pause for a few seconds here and ask for your reflections on any additional topics or angles that should be considered in the area of information technology that we could include to make sure we get at really critical areas of need, or if there's ways to adjust this as well. And also mention you can either verbally give feedback or pop feedback in the chat, or also include feedback in your exit slip if you're not able to share today. But I will pause for any feedback on the information technology piece.
Well, it's Rhonda again.
Hi, Rhonda.
One of the things that I think is very important here is not only do they have access to it, what does the child prefer? We think we need to give everybody technology. Some children do better by having the papers. They can maybe watch something, but I think we need to ask what they as a parent are most comfortable with helping their child on, because not all of us have the skills we need to be able to help them. Not only that, but the child, we need it to where it is the easiest and the best for them so that it is successful. So I think that's a huge angle that I've not saw addressed anywhere.
Thank you. I think that's a really crucial piece. There are maybe a couple questions later on that might get at this, but I think as far as in terms of asking explicitly for what the preference is in terms of mode, I think is really great feedback. So thank you for that. Other thoughts on the information technology piece? I see Cindy Wren says, just something to think about. Are there enough devices for each kid in the house, or will they have to share? That's a great question. We do have that in terms of, I think later in the survey, we also have that being asked, but for sure, that's a definite concern. And having paperwork as a backup is important when technology won't cooperate. Thank you for that. So yeah, adding questions in terms of what alternatives are or what backups are would be great. Thank you. Alternatives and backups. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. But again, if you have feedback on the IT component, please feel free to pop it in the chat or in your exit slip. The next section of the survey talks about student challenges from the spring. So it's asking caregivers to reflect on where their child or children had issues and the severity of those challenges to help us learn about that and to learn where the pain points were. We're covering a variety of things, including, access to materials and managing behaviors, et cetera. But specifically, we're going to be asking about student challenges with their use of technology and how able they were to actually fully utilize the technology they had. We're going to ask about student challenges with navigating online platforms, so ability to log on and create accounts, find the resources they need. We'll also ask about student challenges with availability of learning materials. So do they have the things at home they need to engage fully in the lesson? And then things like challenges with maintaining a daily schedule, completing assignments on time, being engaged in schoolwork, managing stress, and demonstrating positive behavior. So with that, again, I'll pause here to see if there's any feedback on additional topics to be considered for this section or things to be adjusted that might help us better target student challenge needs here.
Hannah, we have several comments regarding the issues we all know too well about using cell phone hotspots because DSL isn't available, and then having multiple children in households, and then the question being is our businesses going to expand internet availability? I can tell you from that issue is being discussed at nearly all levels of state government in various agencies, including the education cabinet and the department. Unfortunately, it's not going to be a fix that can quick fix in time to solve the issue across the state for next semester. I guess that's the bad news. The good news is I believe what happened and the pandemic has really shines a light on that this has to be part of our infrastructure in Kentucky, just like electricity and safe water. I mean, we have to have it, and we all know that the controversies over Kentucky Wired and the promise of that project, and then but the delays that have happened. But just so you know, there are conversations that I'm hearing with agencies about hotspots being put in public libraries. Some of the education co-ops are trying to assist school districts in that same effort, providing some hotspots. There are some efforts by school districts using school buses to have those hotspots in them. Districts are trying to be creative, but it is so far, as we all know, it is not a these are not solutions that solve it for everyone and for every child, which is what we have to have. So it is being looked at, and so far we don't have a solution that covers everyone. But I am encouraged by the conversation and some of the creative ideas out there. I also wanted to address, before we get too far down, Lisa, you asked if we were going to answer Cindy's concern back up there regarding um, kids having to go to babysitters, for example, during the day while parents are working. But if we were on full NTI, how that presents a problem with having assistance. That is absolutely a problem, and we all know that the images you see on some social media where the parents are sitting around in PJs and they're all sitting around a table during the school work, and everything's great, and the dog's sitting there, and it's just a great day. That's not reality, and that the real world is parents are off having to work, or a parent is out having to work, and there's not a lot of available time to help students if they are not in school and doing NTI. We know that's an issue, and districts are continuing to try to figure out how to deal with that, and we're trying to provide them guidance and how to be a little more creative in how teachers are available. Maybe teachers need to or some teachers need to be available, or some type of mechanism needs to be there after hours for students to be able to ask questions. And I know some of the online learning platforms offer that, but not all. But that is a great comment. I don't have an answer for it, but it is on our radar.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. And I'm just kind of buzzing through in the chat here. As far as bogging down the internet with multiple kids, I think that's a great point. I'm going to add that into my notes here to see how we can incorporate that. And then having centralized internet access locations may be critical. Yes, and I think this data collection will help us understand more of what that need looks like, and how that changes throughout the state. Let's see. Making sure that children with IEP accommodations for extra time being honored for due dates, having online due dates set in stone makes it a violation of these accommodations. I think that's a really great point to add in, and make sure we're covering questions around special populations and how those things can be constraints, or how that has been a challenge for families with students with IEPs. So thank you for that note. I'll add that in as well. And then families may not have the tools needed to help their children learn virtually, not just computers and internet connections, but tools for learning to be hands-on. Yes, thank you. And I think there's room to add perhaps some clarification in here on the materials needed for particularly participatory learning as well. So thank you for that question, or that comment also. I'll just scoot forward here. Again, if anything pops up, feel free to add that into the chat later or your exit slip. The final piece of the survey that we're going to be asking about are adult challenges. So what are parents and caregivers and family members who are supporting students learning, what do they see as their pain points and challenges from the spring? And again, this covers a lot of general areas like materials and equipment, managing students' behavior, et cetera, but trying to really focus in on the critical areas. So we've included topics of adult challenges with availability of technology and internet, navigating technology such as online learning platforms, and sometimes there's multiple of those, so how have they been able to navigate that? Adult challenges receiving support for IT issues and whether they're able to get that help. We have adult challenges around supporting students' learning of the content or skills, communication with the school and teacher, maintaining a daily schedule, establishing expectations for schoolwork, having time to support their children's learning, keeping their student focused on schoolwork, and then finally finding time for children to have physical activity. So again, I'll pause for any feedback around this topic list. Is there anything missing that you think is really critical for us to consider to get the best data we can on parent needs?
One of the things on here, and I guess it's just a question so that I understand, because one of the things I know that my son's district's already doing by text, sending out surveys. We got an email yesterday for the second one. Is that coming from this, or is this going to be a survey? And there's reasons I ask this. Is this going to be a survey that KDE does that everyone can share with families that's collected there? Because I think many times, and especially looking at the fifth bullet point, communication with the school and or teacher.
Mhm.
You know, when I was reading one of the questions that was on there, you know, when you had to tell, you know, what was the communication, sometimes I think if it's coming directly from the school, parents are going to hesitate filling that out because they just don't feel as comfortable.
Mhm.
Is this going to be where we can all send this survey to families to get feedback, so it eliminates, not that it would have ever affected them with the school district. I don't mean that, but there is that, we all know there is that fear that comes around different surveys, whatever aspect you're looking at, or profession. But I just wonder if we're going to have that so that we can get a true, clear picture where everyone's comfortable to answer all those questions. Because I'll tell you what happens is when they get to certain questions, and I've done this, I'm not going to fill nothing out bad, so I just won't complete the survey. And we don't want
Mhm.
that. We want, so does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. So this survey is planned to be pushed out to any family and caregiver who wants to respond regarding their household and their students. And the only thing they'll probably identify is maybe the district that they attend, I think, just to give us a sense of, you know, regional differences and things like that. But we won't be asking for identification of schools or teachers or anything like that. So hopefully that will allay some fears around, yeah, that any potential discomfort around identifying negatives. So we're really hoping to have as a broad of a response as possible from as representative a sample as we can. So if once you see communications around these surveys come out, if you could, you know, please encourage those in your community and school and district to participate, that would be really, really helpful. So we're trying to garner as much feedback as possible. Commissioner Brown, did you want to add in to anything on that?
I think that covers it.
Awesome.
Hannah, this is Laura Beard. I'm with the
Great.
Pritchard Committee, but I'm also a parent that I just want to share an experience we had. The communication bullet on that last slide, I don't think covers support. So I think communication from the school or teacher is different than support from the school or teacher. I would just delineate between the two.
Okay.
We had good communication, but we lacked the support. So we had regular emails and regular phone calls, but there wasn't the support to kind of back that up, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. That's a really, really great delineation. I appreciate that. Just looking at through the chat here. Let's see, having the skills to support a child's schoolwork being an issue. Yep, thank you. That's definitely a crucial area. Do you plan on asking parents if they want their kids to go back in person or virtual or both? I believe we have a question sort of generally about whether they're planning to send their kids back, but not necessarily delineating. We could for sure add those options in and try to kind of suss out the buckets where people feel comfortable. So that's a really, really great add as well. Thank you. Need to make sure that there's not such a vast quantity of content that we overwhelm the children and the parents with insurmountable load. So potentially asking about the workload and not just the kind of work being done as well. Our district has already sent out a parent survey. That was one of the questions asked. Great. And then we've been asked in our district if we prefer in-person or at home, doing both and having some doing doing both and having some doing days and some having to work night will be quite overwhelming on teachers as well. Yes, so adding in the mix of how they prefer.
Hannah, I would just add in, I think there's several scenarios we're likely to see. I think you're going to have some parents that are fearful of sending their students and children in, or maybe there's a person in the household that has health conditions, and so they don't want the student being exposed to other people, then possibly bringing in COVID or any other illness into that compromised individual. And so they want to keep their students there. And we're obviously, as I mentioned earlier, want to provide mechanisms for districts to continue to educate that child. And then you have another scenario of when districts may need to actually go to some type of A/B schedule that's being referred to, where to increase social distancing, maybe only certain grades come in on Monday, Wednesday, and then other grades come in on Tuesday, Thursday. And so I think that's what this question's also looking at. I'm hearing from some superintendents that, for example, they're thinking about, let's say they have 4 third grade classrooms, and they know 25% of the third graders are, say, their parents say they want to keep them at home. Then and there's 4 third grade teachers are going to have 3 third grade teachers teaching in class third grade classes like you would normally see, even though there will be social distancing. But then they will dedicate 1 third grade teacher to doing nothing but virtual instruction, dedicated to those students, those 25% of students that are decided they wanted to stay home. That could come through technically enrolling those kids in a virtual school on paper, or it could be that they're still part of Mrs. Brown's classroom on that roster, but yet because the parents want to keep them home for those reasons, they're going to be educated by Mrs. Jones virtually, or there could be all kinds of combinations of maybe Mrs. Jones is handling some subjects and Mrs. Brown is handling others. So we're starting to see a lot of creativity out there about how to handle that. But this question really does point toward, boy, it's going to be a heavy lift for our teachers, just because it's just going to be such a abnormal year. And doing so, it's a heavy lift in a normal year if everything goes as planned, as we all know, and it's a heavy lift for parents in a normal year. So a lot of change and probably some frustration ahead for all of us in the next semester.
Absolutely. And I think that's one thing too. We have our teacher survey coming out to try to get at some of those pain points as well, and anxieties, to unpack that and help in that angle as well. But I think the comments on identifying preferences and how parents view these different setups is really quite helpful. So thank you. And the last couple of questions I see here are, is this a survey that we can share out? It's in development now currently, but once it's completed and we get it pushed out, you can feel free to circulate it to those in your communities and anybody else that you feel, you really want to make sure they get their response in. With that, I will end my section of the presentation. Thank you so much for your excellent feedback today. It's greatly appreciated. If there's anything else that pops into your mind regarding the survey, please feel free to add it into the modes that we have, or if there's anything just generally that you think we've missed or you want us to consider, please add that in there. So thank you so much again for your time today.
Thank you, Hannah. Next, we have a school health update with Angie McDonald. She is our with the Office of Division, KD's Division of District Support, and she is our school nurse consultant. And as I keep saying, in a normal year, she is very busy, just dealing with all the things that are related to school health. But you can't imagine how busy she's been since March, and we so value her expertise. She's been such a valuable part. And has been part of our leadership team meetings every few days. And so I want to thank her for being on to give us an update on the school health aspect.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to parents today. I will start by saying I have been a pediatric nurse for 30 years. I'm going to tell my age. And the mother of 2 children, one of whom is beginning his elementary teaching career, and the other has special needs. So I am so happy to hear all the conversations today about our exceptional students, and so often that they're kind of forgotten about. And so this makes me happy to hear these conversations today. So my guiding question for today is, What are your concerns outside of the recommended guidance for school nurses preparing for the 2021 school year? I was hoping that we would have our guidance piece that we've been working with the Department of Public Health ready, but it is still in the kind of final tweaking stages. So we're a few days away, or a week or so probably, from getting that out to everyone. But I'm sure everyone's been hearing all the new CDC recommendations in regards to social distancing, wearing masks, and that sort of thing. So as a mom, I just kind of wanted to kind of reassure you on the things that we're doing to try to best care for your children in the school year. As Commissioner Brown said, we've started thinking about this in March when we closed schools. School nurses already started thinking of how are we going to get ready to bring these kids back, whether it's in a week or it's the next school year. And we started having virtual district health coordinator meetings. A district health coordinator is a person in the district who is given the assignment by their superintendent to oversee the school health program for that school district. Preferably, it would be a nurse, but there are other instances that could be a psychologist or social worker, but they work very closely with the school nurses in the district and kind of oversee the school health program. So we started meeting with them in March, and a lot of our early meetings were how we can support everyone starting NTI, whether it was simple things like getting medication delivered back to parents. They may have had their only inhaler at school, or students who took daily medication. We needed to get those medications back safely without exposing anyone to any potential illnesses. So that was kind of our first phase of things. And then we started thinking about how we get ready to come back. School districts deal with communicable diseases a lot. You know, they're used to having the flu and strep and whatnot. So your school nurses are very accustomed to how to care for and treat for students with illnesses, and we encourage our school districts to have what we call a flu plan. Basically, what are extra steps that you should be doing when you're having a lot of illness in school, which increase teaching with your students on good hand hygiene, washing hands, using hand sanitizer, coughing into their elbows, and then increase cleaning in the school, prioritizing things that go to the school nurse. You might not want to send a student to the nurse that could get a Band-Aid in the classroom if you're having a flu outbreak, because you don't want to expose your healthy child to the flu in the nurse's office. So little things like that. All your school nurses statewide did a great job of donating their PPE to the state efforts of fighting COVID. And now they're working very hard to try to get the needed PPE for the next school year. We're trying to find resources for them to help them get that as best that they can. I have been working with the Department of Public Health. We've been meeting for at least twice a week, trying to come up with our guidance document for Healthy at Schools. I've also been meeting with some national groups, with the National Association of School Nurses and the National Association of State School Nurse Consultants. And we're sharing ideas, things that are working in our states that could be possibly implemented in our areas as well. So we've been able to come up with some really good guidance or guiding questions for districts to start thinking about when school reopens. For instance, do you have a separate room to, if you have children with COVID symptoms, you don't want to keep them in the nurse's office where you have students who are coming maybe for diabetic checks or whatnot. So do you have a separate room for them to be cared for and to wait until they're being picked up? Of course, they need to be supervised and etc. Are you already thinking about your children with healthcare needs? You may have children that on ventilators, they're on tube feedings, they may have tracheostomies. What are your plans? It's very important that the school nurses are meeting with parents ahead of time, listening to your concerns, and helping you make decisions on what you feel like is the best case scenario for your child, whether it's to come back to school, maybe to come back on a limited basis. Do you want to do homebound instruction or virtual instruction? So they're going to be your advocate at school to help you get all that in place. Um, any questions right now? I wish we had, like I said, I wish I had more guidance to share with you all, but I do want you to know your school nurses are working very hard behind the scenes trying to get ready as best that we can prepare at this point, because there's so many unknowns. But I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has right now.
And Angie, one thing that maybe we could throw out, and I'd like to hear from the members that we're here, that we're hearing this kind of anecdotally from superintendents, and I know this to be true because I've experienced it where I'm at our family farm here in Garrett County in a rural area, and this is about wearing masks. And I go up to the dollar store at night, and I have my mask on. I watch Andy every day at 5 or now at 4, and um, I thought everybody at the dollar store would have their mask on. Well, they didn't. The employees have their mask on because I'm sure Dollar General corporate told them they had to because the governor said they had to. But when I go in there, the folks, I guess they don't even, sometimes they don't recognize me because my face is covered, but I know them from growing up, but they don't have their mask on. They kind of look at me like I'm crazy. And we're hearing, and I know you're probably experiencing that as well. And what we're hearing from superintendents is that there was going to be a huge cultural is kind of how they're phrasing it problem with parents not wanting their kids to wear a mask for whatever reason, or not um, stressing to them that they need to wear a mask. And then when they present themselves to school and we say you need to wear a mask, that's going to present a problem. And it's not just parents, it's obviously if a child goes to the dollar store and they see their neighbor not wearing one, or their minister or whoever else it is they look up to in the community, then they're obviously don't see that as being important. So that's something that we're really wrestling with here and talking to public health about, and that we're anxious about, and that obviously school superintendents and principals and teachers are starting to get really anxious about, knowing that that is really what our health experts tell us is the most simple thing we can do to help prevent the spread, yet we know it may be a problem with enforcement. So I welcome your all's feedback on that issue.
Yes, Commissioner Brown, that's perfect, because I live in Mercer County, and it's about 50-50 of when you go out, if you see people in masks. But then on the other hand, when I visit my mother in Casey County, which is a lot more rural even, you don't see hardly anybody wearing a mask, and they look at you like you've got 4 heads because you're wearing one. So yes, this will be a huge issue to deal with. And let's be realistic, it's not, how are you going to keep a mask on a 5 or 6-year-old first grader all day? I totally understand that. And I know those teachers are going to be constantly redirecting, Johnny, don't shoot your neighbor with your mask, or Johnny, don't pick a hole in your mask. So, we know there's going to, we expect districts to just do the best that you can in the situation that you're in. But yes, that is definitely a huge issue that we've been struggling with.
Angie, there's a question: are there plans to take all students' temperatures on their way in? I know we already know that public health has weighed in on that, or will be weighing in that. I think that's a yes and a no question depending on the situation. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And like I said, in the tweaking process, this may change before it's completely finalized. So I'm almost a little afraid to say for sure in what instances it would be. But yeah, they do recommend screening and temp checks, or at least the parents doing them at home. But we'll see once the final guidance is done. Well, it's all rolled out. So you can't wear a mask while eating lunch. That's true. That is true. And they're making allowances for that, for where the mask can be removed for lunch, or getting a drink of water, such and such. And there are going to be recommendations about band and social distancing and the spacing and the settings that it can be in. So that is all included in that document.
Well, I have several, I know you're surprised, several things that I wanted to just kind of ask and share. That's from, quite a few of our families. First of all, regarding the mask, some children, because of their disability or their condition, they're not able to wear the mask. And this not necessarily is always the physical disability. It may be social, emotional, but then even outside of that, if there's not a disability involved, some children have experienced such trauma in their life, depending upon what they lived through, that having their mouth, having part of their face covered is traumatic. It's like reliving it. So I would really love to make sure that we see that we are addressing all this. And I know, that there is so much that has to be addressed. It's overwhelming. But I do think we need to make sure we take those things into consideration, because it's not necessarily just I don't want to do it. And that's with adults too, so there's some different things that we need to, I think, just be all related with the trauma-informed care and all of that. And I know that everybody has been doing great work around that. But then also sort of a twofold about when we're talking about the health, because this is so critical given going through a pandemic, is, obviously we've all talked about, and we all know that our schools and our teachers are overwhelmed and overworked on a normal basis, not counting all this. What plans and questions, and because when you have medical recommendations, sometimes those don't necessarily align with what the plan is for the child, whether it be the IEP or what's best for the child. And, sometimes you can't do that distancing that they require, whether it be for personal care or because of maybe social emotional disability, that they need more of that hands-on. So I think really looking at how we're going to address, there's going to have to be such huge manpower that the schools are going to be in desperate need of. They needed more people just on a normal basis. So I'm really concerned about how that's going to roll out and how we're going to be able to follow the best recommendations medically, but still be able to provide what is best for each child and what they require. Is that that's kind of, and also one more thing. So is that, so if they choose to go, and that it would be virtually, right? And I know, some children go on homebound. Is it going to be addressed through this, that it's not required for a child to be determined to be on homebound from the doctor, that they can do it? And will it be addressed specifically so that everybody doesn't have to go through that process to put their child on homebound? Will this be sort of a three-tiered option where you have, where it's the in-person, the virtual, and it's separated, or all the children going to have to be put on homebound to be considered that?
Rhonda, all those are great points. And just for the record, I love it when you ask questions here and on SEAC, because I know when Rhonda speaks up, we're going to have a good meeting, because you're always on point and bring up a good issue. So thank you. That is exactly what our intention is, the home hospital is, and homebound is, you have to, there are hoops to jump through. And in a normal time, those are, you have that doctor's recommendation on that, and that's what's necessary. But this is something in the middle between homebound and just normally sending your child to school, because we're in a global pandemic. And we want to recognize that, hey, it's okay. We know that there's a certain percentage of parents out there that are just not comfortable for all the reasons we've stated before of sending that child in that environment with other students just because of the uncertainty or whatever the reason may be. And that may not last very long when we kind of get on into the semester, but we know that's initially going to be a problem. I've seen figures as high as 25%. I believe I saw a figure in Great Britain. They've surveyed their parents. 2/5, I think, are probably not going to send back immediately. One superintendent estimates around 10%, at least initially. So what we want to do is make sure we do the waivers and the executive order to make sure districts know that, hey, there's a middle ground here. We don't want parents having to jump through hoops. If you have the ability and the willingness to educate that child virtually and using non-traditional instruction, then we want to give you the tools to make that happen, and make sure we're sending state money to you and attendance and all of that. We're going to work on that for you. And then that's obviously you don't have to jump through. The intention is that they would not have to even touch the home hospital because that is a heightened standard, and that's not where we are.
And I'd also like to speak to the fact that you had wonderful questions about students needing one-on-one care or whatnot. Those allowances are all going to be in that guidance that, you know, if a child needs one-on-one, they're going to get one-on-one. They should have it. But that staff member, of course, needs to wear protect PPE to protect themselves and that student. So that's not going to interfere with that child's needs. Also, there is definitely the statement in there that students who have underlying health conditions, disabilities, or other are not forced to wear a mask. So that has been addressed, and that's in the national CDC recommendations as well.
Rhonda, I would also add as a caveat to what we just said, while we are going to make efforts to, make these attendance available and do all the things to make this kind of a hybrid option work for the next semester, school districts are still going to have the local control to decide whether or not they are going to extend non-traditional instruction to just a subset of students. Now, of course, if they still qualify for home hospital, they would have to do that. Now, I'm hearing, and I don't have data on this, and we've not done a survey, but almost every superintendent I've spoken with very much is on board with that. They don't want to lose that child, but just because the child is fearful or the parents are fearful, they are wanting to educate that child, and not lose the child for fear of the child just not being educated. And knowing that the child would not be probably in many situations if the public schools were not able to step in this kind of hybrid role. But just know, though, there may be some situations where districts, for financial reasons or other reasons or staffing issues, that they may not be willing to do or want to do the hybrid model. But from what we're hearing anecdotally, that's districts are embracing that, so long as KDE and the state can get them some mechanisms to account the child, and that's exactly what we're going to do. And you may want to address, Angie, the kids eating in the classroom. I think that question is up there from Lisa.
That is addressed in the document, but like I said, I don't know if it may change with the last little bit of tweaking. So I'm a little leery to speak to that. I don't know, Commissioner Brown, do you have?
Yeah, for what we're initially, public health really, they really want the idea here from the public health perspective is that you want to keep kind of a group of students isolated together, even though those students may number 20, 25, or whatever the number may be. You want interactions with other groups of students to be lessened, so that if a student were to be sick, when you're doing the contact tracing, and that student has less exposure. And so if your student is in the third grade class, you want the third grade class kind of just stay together, and you don't want third grade mixing with fourth grade and fifth grade. And you want to kind of keep those divisions as much as possible, until we get through the pandemic. That's kind of the overall thinking. And so because of that, one of the recommendations is that students eat in the classroom, even though they may go through the line and then bring it back. We know in some schools that would work better than others. You know, many elementary schools are smaller, and it would be convenient to do that. There are other schools that are huge, and it's a hike to get from one end to the other carrying a cafeteria tray. So public health heard those concerns, and so we believe they're going to be coming back with additional guidance that enables districts to feed students in cafeterias. But then, of course, there are certain things that would have to be, if the third, I keep talking about third grade, if the third grade comes in, for instance, then you would probably need to do a sanitation protocol wipe down of the cafeteria tables until the before the fourth grade comes in. And you know, a lot of those things may happen already, but that would have to really be a enforced protocol that districts would utilize. So we think they are moving in that direction to allow that, or at least have that choice. And then there's also going to be an emphasis on if Kevin needs to sit at the same seat at the table in the cafeteria every day, things like that. And that assists with contact tracing, meaning that if I were to be later have COVID, then they would know who I was sitting by at that cafeteria, and that would help them with the contact tracing. So, Angie, I'm an amateur health professional here, so did I cover that? Is that accurate?
That's perfect. Yes. So the key is to have them spread out as much as possible if they are in a class or in the cafeteria. So they may have to feed half the kids at one time than they normally would, just so they can spread out, you know. So like I said, we're tweaking it to get it to be a little more user friendly.
The only thing I would like is if we could possibly know ahead of time what districts, if there are districts that don't, because if we know ahead of time the districts that aren't signing on for the virtual option, if we can know those, because we're already going to know there's going to be issues then for families not sending their child back for various reasons, so that we can target some outreach so that we can help families working with everybody and share what then would need to be done, so that there is that help that they're going to need. So if we knew ahead of time what school districts don't, then we could really help our families much better.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point. Another comment here about janitorial services going hand in hand with the health of the school. Absolutely. In a normal time, janitorial services are so important, a essential member of school staff. Now, janitorial services are a skilled trade. You talk about the bleach solution and the ratios and all of that. Absolutely. You know, and I keep going back to a normal year, which we may never see again, but you know, having enough, and I'm on loan from Jefferson County. I know in Jefferson County schools have a problem with hiring enough bus drivers, hiring enough custodians. That is an issue, and it will continue to be an issue. And you know, the duties are more going to be more advanced, as this question implies, this semester, just because of the health situation. All right, Angie, anything else?
I can't think of anything. I'm happy to stay on to the rest of the call if anybody has any other questions or concerns. And I appreciate everyone's input. And just know we're doing our best to have your child to be as safe and healthy as possible at school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have feedback that we want to provide you from our recent superintendent webcast. We have Dr. Kelly Foster. She's an associate commissioner with the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support. And we also have Robin Kinney, associate commissioner, Office of Finance and Operations. And the guiding question here is, what are the concerns you are hearing from parents about the reopening of schools in the fall? We've covered some of those things already, but many more aspects of that we want to hear from you.
Good afternoon. It's past the noon hour, so I'll introduce with good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Robin Kinney. I'm the Associate Commissioner in the Office of Finance and Operations. And so my office deals a lot with the logistics of districts and how they operate. To share with you a little bit about our last superintendent's call, first, let me compliment all of you on the really great feedback and questions you've been asking. And I guess I would say to a large degree, I am reassured that you are asking the same questions and observing the same challenges as your local school districts and their superintendents are raising as well. So I think there is a lot of, you are in sync with the questions that they are trying to get answers to. And so that's very encouraging that people are thinking of the same things. At a recent, it's not the last superintendent's webcast, but I'll go back a couple of superintendent's webcasts ago. We were fortunate to have Dr. Stephen Stack, the commissioner of the Department for Public Health, on the call with our superintendents to talk about really the coronavirus pandemic and from a public health standpoint, what he sees and how he is encouraging us to think about the best way to start school in the fall with the guidance of public health, but also acknowledging that we have some really difficult decisions that have to be made as communities, as families, as school districts. I think it was really refreshing to hear that he understands some of the things that are being talked about are will be difficult at best to achieve 100% of the time. And I know you've talked on some of those as far as the wearing of masks. So he really started, and his team that was with us that day really approached our discussion from a standpoint of looking at what is feasible, practical, acceptable, and possible within the communities that you reside in. We are working very hard with the Department for Public Health to achieve that document that will come out to give that guidance, because that's what really people are trying to finalize first, upon which all these other very important decisions can be made, whether you start school in a traditional model, if you have both remote learning and in-person learning, if you are all remote learning all at one time. And I can assure you, as we talk to superintendents, they really overall are looking for the maximum flexibility to really serve their students and their families. So that's very encouraging too. I think they are wrestling with some of the logistics on how to accomplish that, but I think their goal in mind is to always put those students first. As we talked about some of the, and you've had great presenters this morning talking about instruction and what instruction might look like. And I'm going to touch a little bit further on the operations side, because those are things that logistically will impact you as parents and families. So if we can talk for just a minute about transportation. One of the things that your districts are really wrestling with is what will transportation look like to accommodate the needs of students and families and getting them to school. We are looking at transportation with that backdrop of the kind of overall general guidance that we've already heard about social distancing. So there's that 6 feet apart, the wearing of masks, the good sanitation, the hand sanitizer, and the taking of temperatures. And so as school districts are thinking about that and awaiting that further guidance from public health, some of the things they have raised, and as Commissioner Brown alluded to, the bus driver that's on your bus is already trying to make that the safest transportation experience possible for your students. So if we layer on additional, maybe needed requirements, who's going to assist that bus driver with that? Does that require additional monitors? Does that require additional staffing for, if it rolls out, taking of temperatures, wearing of mask? Can we have more students on the bus if every student is wearing a mask during that trip, rather than the 6 foot social distancing that we have heard about, which would really, if you're only doing that, would invite a model that you can only transport maybe half the students. and have them sit every other seat. So these logistical concerns are what we are having that back and forth conversation with the for Public Health to try to come up with a balanced approach that is practical and feasible and possible, but still mitigates all the health concerns that families and students will continue to have. I'm going to stop there for just a minute about transportation and see if, from a parent's perspective, what concerns or what feedback you are hearing from parents in your community about transportation. Okay, not hearing any comments or any questions on that. So the next area, and we talked a little bit about this in your chat and in the meeting earlier about food service and the logistics, and many of those questions surrounded the logistics of in person when we have students in the building. How will that work and how will that look? Whether it's students receiving their meals in the classroom, or if they're going into a larger cafeteria where we can social distance appropriately and assign seating. So I heard some question and conversation about that, all very good. I think the other thing that superintendents are wrestling with is if you do have students that are doing remote learning from home and have food needs, how do we take care of those students? How do we make sure that they are receiving meals that they would typically receive in person, but now that they're at home? So that is a question that superintendents are wrestling with. As we were winding down the past school year, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the various models that school districts offered to families when everyone was kind of doing that remote learning NTI. And that was, the drive-through service where parents could come and pick up meals at schools. Again, maintaining that social distancing and trying to keep the appropriate separation between families and school staff. And we also heard of districts that were utilizing their buses and transportation and food service people to actually take food to families, either at the bus stop or on certain routes. The challenge that we're hearing, that we're wrestling with, and we're trying to address is when you have both in person and you have remote learners, food service is very difficult to do both of those at the same time. So that is a challenge that we're trying to work through with school districts, understanding the vital importance of food to our students. In the month of April, our school districts, along with a few selected partners, actually made available 11 million meals to our students just in the month of April. So it's a huge number that we're serving. And of course, during the summer months, we're continuing to do that with the help of local school districts. So I'm curious if you've heard anything from your parents or from any of you about concerns about food service during a more hybrid model of in-person and remote learning.
This is Melissa Goins, and I've joined the meeting late. But
Hi, Melissa.
Hey, Robin. Hey, everybody. I would just say that I understand. I can't imagine the challenges. I don't know anything about the logistics of food service. I'm sure the challenge is real when you're doing that hybrid model. But I just can't overstate the importance of getting meals out to those remote learners. Some of those remote learners are going to be our most vulnerable families, which I'm sure you guys have talked about. And so, if there's any way that we as parents or even us as FRISCs can help, I'm sure they're already involved in some capacity. We want to do that because it's just really, really important. So that would be my only concern, I guess. It's probably something you already know, but it's just really important.
It's good to hear your feedback, Melissa. We have it as a very high priority. We know that students can't learn unless they're ready to learn, no matter where they're sitting, whether in a classroom or at their home. So it is high on our radar. We're just trying to work through the logistics of what that would look like and different models. Again, local school districts will probably have to come up with whatever works best for their community, but we do see that as a pretty big challenge. But thank you for your comments, and we appreciate all the work of the FRISC as they support our students and our families on across many, many needs that families have. So we're always appreciative when you're at the table with us.
Thank you.
And then the last thing from a family perspective, and you've touched on it a little bit, is that child care component. Um, child care is another really big challenge that we continue to impress upon the Department for Public Health from the perspective that it's really important that families have as much flexibility about child care and what is available to them. Different parents and families will have different comfort levels about sending their children back to daycare or childcare. But again, the flexibility of choice and opportunity is very, very important. Without childcare, it's really difficult even for our schools to staff the schools. Think of all the teachers that have kids. They may have kids in school and they may have some that are going to childcare at the same time. So it's really important that the child care piece be worked through so that we have the best opportunity to have all the resources available to support our students. And then finally, I'll just share with you that and we've, Commissioner Brown has talked about this on the call, but it is the funding aspect and trying to work through the funding aspect. And our goal very much with the help of superintendents is to create an environment that they are not incentivized or disincentivized about the model that they come up with for their parents and families and their students. So we don't want the funding mechanism to push their decision in one way or another. They just need to do what's best for their families, and then we work out the logistics on the funding so that they can make those decisions without fear of losing funding. So I just want to share with you that that is sort of the goal of the Department of Education to make that happen. And we are working through that right now with superintendents. On our next superintendent call on Tuesday, we will have more of that discussion for them to assist us in thinking of ways that we can accomplish that goal together. But I think the word of the day is flexibility on all fronts for our parents, our families, and for school districts. That's all I really have to share at this point. If anyone has any questions of me, the guiding question was, what are the concerns you're hearing from parents about the reopening of school? And I've kind of tailored my remarks more on the operational side. If you have any other comments or questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
I guess the thing that just keeps coming to my mind about all of it is how feasible is all of this actually to be able to roll out, and in the manner that I know that we're all working to plan for, but looking at all of the areas that we've talked about, whether it be the health, the logistical operations of it, the learning of the child, the food for the child. I guess I just keep going back to the how can we make this happen? Because it doesn't, I don't know, it's overwhelming, and I'm sure every one of us feel that way. But I know that families are really struggling with that too. And I guess really, what is the likelihood that we are going to be able to hit the ground running and we're actually going to start? Maybe I'm jumping too far ahead, but actually going to be able to start and roll it out on a logistical side to where they start in the fall.
Well, I think if you're asking my opinion, I'd say we're going to start school in the fall. It's going to look different than it has ever looked before. And to some degree, I think we're all going to have to kind of step back and really do the best we can. I think with people's hearts in the right place and wanting to really do the very best for our children, that will overcome a lot of obstacles. But I can also tell you that the likelihood that it will not be perfect, and the likelihood that not everyone will totally agree 100% with every local school district decision will remain. So I am very optimistic that we will have school in the fall. It's just I don't know that anyone can tell you here on June 10th exactly what it will look like.
I completely agree with that. I would add to that, if you were to tell me a year ago that there would be a scenario in March where we would go from 83 school districts doing non-traditional instruction to 172 school districts doing non-traditional instruction in a matter of 48 hours, and up to 2,000 feeding sites in a matter of some districts going on summer feeding in a matter of applying and being on in 48 hours, I would say you're crazy. And all of that happened. Now, it wasn't perfect. We have thousands of children that were not reached, that were lost, that we lost connection with, that for various reasons, even if they had internet access, they are not participating. Some didn't have internet access. We all know all that. We know there are elements of IEPs that were not implemented for various reasons. And so we, as Robin said, it's not perfect. That spirit, though, I would put that up against any state in the country. And I'm biased because I'm a Kentuckian, but also there's some truth to that. There was a Wall Street Journal article on March 28th. I'll never forget it. And it said some school districts in the country, some states and school districts around the country are discontinuing virtual and remote instruction because, and the quote said, it's too tough. And boy, it is tough. But we were not one of those states. We didn't discontinue it. We kept going, and we met the 1,062 hours, as imperfect as it was, every school district, and on until the last one on May 27th. That did not happen in every other state. I think we assume every state's doing it like we are. That's a testament to our families, to communities, teachers, superintendents, and however, I'm not naive enough to know that there are problems and that there are going to be problems. But that spirit and the fact that our schools are still in most areas of the state, the centers of our community, I really think that bodes well for us. And I think we're going to see a lot of neat things happen despite the obstacles. But we also have to shine a light and celebrate the things that are going well, but we also have to shine a light on the things that we're not doing well. We know we're going to lose kids, and we don't serve every kid well and I keep saying a normal school year. And there's a question here about achievement gaps, and we can go ahead and address that now. How are achievement gaps going to be looked at this year? And I guess the thing you need to do to be a popular commissioner is cancel the K-Prep test, which I had the honor, I guess, of doing. And boy, and that was obviously the right decision. On the other hand, that's how we measure accountability and how we keep everyone honest and making sure that we are, not only as a state, but by school and by district serving kids. And so it's starting to be talked about again in national circles as well as at the state, whether or not, because we're going into an unusual year, whether federal testing requirements should somehow be waived. And so I'm not aware of the US Ed weighing in on that yet, other than that it's being discussed and kind of chatter, just like that question is. So I don't know what the answer to that is. But regardless of whether we end up having mandated federal testing and K-Prep next year, districts need and will be doing their own testing. And the K-Prep testing is designed to give you feedback on what the school is doing. Unfortunately, under the federal requirements for what that test has to look like, it's not good as a diagnostic test. And I know just enough about testing to be dangerous, but I'm learning. But MAP testing, for example, is utilized in a lot of our schools, and that will be utilized when students come back to see where they are, to see what they need to work on and where they are in the curriculum, and so and the deficiencies that they may have. So we know that will be taking place. We just don't know yet how that's going to play out with the K-Prep And then, of course, we have changes to our state accountability system through Senate Bill 158 this year that will roll on in the coming years, which further complicates things as well. Kelly, are you on? Do you have a comment on the testing piece or the gaps?
Yes, I'm on. I would just, I agree with everything that you said. One of the things that we are definitely, thinking about and trying to figure out ways, and we had some folks on earlier talking about instruction. We recognize that there are going to be many kids when we return to school, if that's face to face or if that's online, who are going to need additional remediation, intervention. And so we are going to try to help local districts provide that as much as possible with resources and different ideas. Teachers are really going to have to assess their kids when they come back. To kind of figure out where they are. We talk about formative assessment and summative assessment, and that formative assessment being the piece that you're doing all day with your kids to see what they truly understand and where they are in the learning process, so that you can adjust your instruction moving forward. So there's going to need to be some formative assessment done pretty quickly when we return, so we can really figure out the learning needs of each individual kid. Differentiation is going to be more important than it ever has been before. And I'll just share with the parents too. I know that you all know that we've been releasing some guidance at KDE over the last few weeks, and those pieces come out every Monday, and there's a press release each Monday that goes out with a link to that guidance. And next week we will be providing guidance around intermittent closures. So if we do start school face to face and there's a peak in cases in the fall, then we are providing districts some guidance that they can use if we have to close suddenly. I think everyone did a great job with the situation we were in March, but it was sudden, and no one was prepared to clean out lockers or make sure that you took all the materials you needed home or turn in your sports uniform. So there'll be some guidance documents that go out on Monday around intermittent closures. And then over the next several weeks, we'll also be releasing guidance on transportation, food service, social distancing at schools, traffic. If you happen to take your kids to school or pick them up, what that drop off is going to look like, how schools are going to be able to conduct the required emergency drills, performance-based instruction. There'll be additional guidance around teaching and learning. There'll be some guidance going out soon from Career and Tech Ed about how they are going to open up the area technology centers so that students can get back in there, especially seniors that have recently graduated, if they need to take some sort of assessment to get a certification. There'll be guidance coming out around exceptional learners. And then Angie mentioned earlier talking about public health's guidance. And once it comes out, we will be piggybacking on that with additional guidance around healthy at school. So lots of information coming out in a quick amount of time, but we recognize the need to try to provide guidance to the districts as they make decisions about the upcoming school year.
Well, we appreciate the guidance so much. I can't say that enough, because it helps all of us, and that everybody is being looked at, so that we're looking at all situations, all scenarios, all children's needs. And two, I just want to say, Commissioner Brown, we're in it for the long haul with everybody, and I do want to say, especially because I do know in the different groups throughout the United States that I'm a part of, and with the other centers, Kentucky has achieved amazing things. I don't think I know of a single state who has come together like Kentucky has. None of us waited for somebody to tell us what to do, whether you were a parent, you were a family organization, you were a teacher. We all jumped in and made tons of mistakes as we went. But I do have great hopes. I just wanted to make sure that I brought up that there is that, and how we help our families get through that overwhelmingness of how are we going to do this? Because I do think that is part of living through a pandemic. whether it not just be school, but just emotionally living through every day. And I'm very grateful that we're addressing those social emotional concerns, the racial concerns that have been brought up, so that we're addressing this and we are acknowledging it, because that's half the battle. And so I'm so appreciative of that, because our children and our families need that so much.
I appreciate that, Rhonda. And after a day like yesterday, we have to have a little humor. And what you said about Kentucky reminds me, my partner has a T-shirt that says, "Some of y'all weren't raised in Kentucky," and it shows.
I need that T-shirt. So we're going to have to get that for the whole week. We all need to be sporting that T-shirt, right?
Kelly and Robin, I think that completes your all's presentation. We're can take any just open questions you have, any issues we haven't covered. Feel free. And then I don't know that we've put the exit slip in the chat. Can someone do that? And if not, we will email that to you if for some reason we can't put that in there. We're happy to be able to serve you all a virtual lunch today. There's the yes, there's the exit slip. Again, this will take you less than just a few minutes to fill out. We started using this with our student advisory group. It works really well. You may have things that you want to share or that you weren't comfortable sharing with the group, or that you just thought of at the end. Feel free to put that in there. Those, again, don't just go somewhere to collect dust. Those are incorporated in the minutes and the feedback of this meeting. So I want to thank you for that. If there's nothing else, I want to remind you also, as parent advisory members, you don't have to wait until a meeting to give us your feedback. If there are issues that come up or questions or concerns, you can certainly email me or any of the presenters here today along the way. The next meeting is scheduled for September 9th, but just know we're going to put you all on call because there may be a need to bring you in again, particularly if the situation changes, or I don't want to even predict things that might happen with the virus, but right now I believe we're on a steady course and we have some plans in place. So if nothing else changes, we'll see you September. But of course, if not, if we need some additional guidance, we're going to bring you all in. And the commissioner, search is ongoing, and so this will be probably the last time I will be with you in this capacity. The state board will be meeting tomorrow and the next day to interview 11 applicants for the permanent commissioner. I'm not a candidate for that. And we hope to have a new commissioner named sometime in mid to late July through August. So, and we'll be looking forward to that person coming on board. So, thank you all. I see some comments here about your willingness to help, and I know you all are all to a person leaders in your communities and your schools, and in addition to being parents. So thank you for that. And again, I want to thank you for indulging me earlier about during this time. This is a difficult day for all of us, but Teresa would have wanted us to have this conversation and with you and continue on. So thank you for that. Everybody have a great rest of the day. Thank you for what all you do. Take care.